they're using the psychedelic therapy that's becoming very popular for combat veterans and former fighters, people who have dealt with more like physical trauma, but also emotional trauma. And I believe that you work a little bit, or you've been researching a lot of this psychedelic therapy for this specific thing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, and Dr. Yehuda also works on this as well. But I think that when we work on this research together in the psychedelic space, but I think the simplest psychedelic medicines are a little bit complex to understand in the little time we have today. Sure. But the easiest way to understand it is that these medicines, psychedelic means to show the mind. So psyche means mind, delos means to show. So when you think about what happens in our dreams, we're getting our conscious mind that always has to be awake to protect us physically when we're in our normal waking day-to-day state, goes to sleep. And then we get exposed to all of this content that's stored in our subconscious mind, or what's called beneath awareness mind, right? So we have our awareness, which is what we're thinking about right now when we're listening to this interview, and at the same time, we have everything that is not in our awareness, right? The feeling of our clothes on our skin, the feeling of the chair beneath us, the temperature of the room, the rain or sun outside, wind, whatever it might be. There's a million things happening around us that our bodies are aware of, but we are not consciously aware of. So when we go into a dream state, this is the most common psychedelic state where we have an opportunity to show ourselves our subconscious minds. Right. And that's what psychedelic really means. You can access it with dreams. You can access it with meditation, deep breathing, yoga, movement meditation, biofeedback, float tanks, and Apollo, and with assistance from medications that biochemically change receptors or activate, I should say, receptor pathways in our brains that have now been shown to reliably induce these psychedelic states that show us our subconscious minds, right? They gently reduce, by making us feel safe and catalyzing our safety response when used properly. They help us to remember that we're safe enough to allow our ego or our conscious awareness mind to take a back seat, which allows us to then look down into our subconscious minds, the parts of ourselves that are always there, but are not necessarily deemed important for survival on a day-to-day basis or a moment-to-moment basis. And it allows us to become aware of that so that we can bring it forth into our awareness and then process it, work on it while feeling safe, and then ideally integrate it into our whole sense of self, not a sense of self that's fractured into lots of different pieces by nature of what the people around us told us they liked about us or didn't like about us, right?
Yeah, and for me personally, the most psychedelic experience that I've had, I've done like psychedelics and plants and these things, but meditation, like really diving deep into meditation and specifically breathing exercises and calming the mind, it just blows my mind every time when I'm in a meditation and then I go, oh, I can hear the Wi-Fi router. Oh, I can hear the door crack behind me. And you start realizing there's all these things that are happening all the time, every day. And when you slow the mind down and then you start to feel like, oh, there's a little tension in my back. Oh, there's a little tension in just the exercise of relax your face. And you start to realize like, oh, I just like spend all of my day with my tongue at the roof of my mouth or my forehead crinkled in a way. And it's creating all of this tension throughout the rest of my body. And it's that process of when you slow the mind, then everything starts to loosen up. And then there's, like you said, all of these other things that are happening in the background, just simply by noticing your breath, observing the things around you. And it could all be done free of charge without any external substances.
Right. Absolutely. But it is challenging to do on your own.
Absolutely.
And I think this is part of the problem, right? Is that we were never taught, most of us at least, were not taught how to access these states of mind from a young age. Most of us had experiences probably similar to me where you might have, people might have had a psychedelic states in dreams, or they might have had psychedelic states through meditation or breathing as children, or through sports or yoga or stretching or whatever, but not been told what it was, not taught how to understand it. And then we're left basically being like, okay, well, these aren't real, these aren't important, so I'm just going to ignore them. And that's absolutely not the case, right? Ultimately, we know now that when you teach kids how to do breath work, how to be aware of their breathing when they're young, how to concentrate on their breath, how to meditate, any number of these techniques make it that much easier to do when you're an adult and to tap into those when you're an adult. But really what we're talking about, regardless of whether you're starting as a kid or whether you're starting as an adult, is to expand our awareness, right? When we perceive threat from our environment, our minds go into our minds and bodies go into a sympathetic fight or flight, stress response, survival mode. And that stress response survival mode is critical if we're about to run out of air, water, food, shelter, or we're being chased by a predator. If we're not experiencing, or we could be kicked out of our community, right? If we're going to lose any of those things, those 5 or 6 things, then we want our survival response to kick in. That's the doing part of our brains. But the meditation, the breath work, the processing, the healing part is the listening part of our brains, right? And our bodies. If we're always in the doing part, then we can't devote resources to listening, right? So when we think about what we want to do, we want to establish balance by practicing breath work. Breath work is balancing the doing part, that sympathetic fight or flight part, and the parasympathetic receiving rest and digest recovery part of our nervous system that's activated by safety, and bringing that to the forefront, because when we're safe, all of a sudden we can divert resources not only to listening to our environment, listening to our bodies, expanding our awareness, et cetera, and healing on a mental, emotional level. We can also naturally divert resources back to immunity, reproduction, metabolism, and weight management, sleep and energy recovery and restoration, right? All of these parts of our body, creativity, right? All these parts that are deemed unnecessary in the moment of threat.
Yeah, and I see